Hello, everybody, and welcome to the sixth edition already of Nuclear Heat. I'm your host, Vince Russo. This is WrestlingInc.com. I want to talk a little bit today about women's wrestling and the plight of women's wrestling and where it was, where it is today, and maybe where it needs to go. Listen, I've always been an advocate of women's wrestling. I've liked women's wrestling going way back to when I first started watching wrestling. And obviously, back then in the early 70s, the only women's wrestler that was really a star and the one that really, stood out was the Fabulous Moolah. Arguably the greatest female wrestler of all time. But, having worked for the three companies, I was always a proponent of women's wrestling. I love athletic women. I love the sexiness of female wrestlers. And a lot of times, I'll be honest with you, I was in the minority, and I had to fight, for the girls and their spot on the show. Because let's face it, wrestling is a man's world, and when you're dealing with some, old school people in the wrestling business. They see the women as a sideshow, and they don't really see a place for women in wrestling. I dealt with that at the WWE level. I dealt with that at WCW, and I dealt with that at TNA. So I was always constantly fighting for women's wrestling because I believed in it. I was a big fan in it. And I'll be honest with you, the women wrestlers were always the easiest to work with. They weren't prima donnas. They didn't know more than you. They didn't question everything you wanted to do. And that made sense because they just wanted to be on the show. They just wanted the opportunity to not only show the world, but also show the rest of the guys in the locker room what they could do. So when you wrote them into the show and you told them what you needed them to do, there was never really any resistance or pushback or anything like that. They were very, 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 very easy to work with. In 1985, this is, again, we all know Moolah. Everybody knew Moolah. But in 1985, the WWE really put women's wrestling on the map because this was WrestleMania, the Rock and wrestling connection. This was the big angle between the Fabulous Moolah and the passing of the torch to Wendy Richter. If you remember, this is going back a very long time now, 85, we're talking about 30 years. Cyndi Lauper was brought into the angle. Of course, at the time, Cyndi Lauper was very hot with Girls Just Want to Have Fun. She just hit the scene. And, so in 1985, women's wrestling made a lot of noise. And Wendy Richter defeated Moolah at WrestleMania to become the women's champion. Here's what a lot of people don't understand. 5 short years later, the WWE women's title became vacant. There was no women's wrestling, nothing. It wasn't even important enough to warrant the title in 1980. So here they had it in 1985, red hot, with the WrestleMania angle. Wendy Richter wins the title. She carries that belt for a while, but 5 years later, there is no women's wrestling in the WWE, basically. At around the same time, I remember, watching AWA during that time and seeing Medusa. Medusa, to me, was the next hot thing. She was the next women's wrestler that was going to, kind of revive women's wrestling again. And I used to see her in AWA, and she was phenomenal. Some of the stuff she did with Sherry Martel, Alundra, I have a relationship with her. Interviewed her several times, spent a lot of time with her at the WWE, but she would basically tell me when she was breaking in, they put her up against Sherry Martel, and literally Sherry Martel used to beat the ever-loving crap out of Medusa, in the ring, to see if Medusa really wanted to be in the wrestling business. And of course, Medusa was a tough girl. And, Medusa and Sherry, they were the two, at that time. Medusa went to the WCW from 1991 to 1993, and they used her as a valet. She didn't even wrestle really at WCW. Perhaps the greatest woman wrestler on the planet at the time. She was used as a valet for Rick Rude. Finally, about 1993, where the WWE Women's title had been vacant for 3 years, the WWE brought in Medusa to reinvigorate the women's title. This is when I started working for the WWE, about 1994. So 1994, 1995, I spent a lot of time with Medusa. And it was during this time, she was the champion. She was the only real recognizable women's wrestler on the roster. They used to bring in girls for her to wrestle. She was instrumental in that. A lot of girls used to come over from Japan, Bull Nakano. And from 93 to 95, Medusa was the women's champion. But again, still a sideshow, still a side act. This is unbelievable to me when you look at wrestling today, 2015. In 1995, as the women's champion, Medusa was released by the company. I've said this a million times, and of course, nobody believes what Vince Russo says. But in 1995, the WWE was in such financial straits that they let the women's champion go. So they let Medusa go in 1995. Again, no women's title, no women's belt, no women's wrestling. Fast forward to now, 1998. And those of you that follow me at VinceRussoBrand.com, we are now looking at the early stages of the Attitude Era and how that all developed, starting at the tail end of 1997. And right now we're in about March of 98. And you can see the growth of Sable. Sable was starting to get over huge. There was no denying her, no doubt about it. Let me tell you how Sable was hired by the WWE. Vince McMahon had a meeting with Mark Mero, who had left WCW, and Mark Mero literally brought his wife, Rena Mero, who nobody knew, along to the meeting. And during the course of that meeting, there was some talk of using Rena as his valet. At that time, I was just on the brink of starting to write the television. It was more Bruce Pritchard at that time with Pat Patterson. I think Cornette was involved. But basically, Rena Mero was brought in to be the garnish for Mark Mero. Well, we all know what happened with Sable. Sable exploded. So we're about 1998 now. There hasn't been a women's title for 3 years. I went to Vince McMahon and I talked to him about, Vince, let's bring back that women's title. Let's bring it, let's put it on Sable. And the reason why I said that was I told Vince, from a business point of view, Sable will be able to open doors that maybe a lot of men wouldn't be able to. Here's a perfect case in point. At that point, like Howard Stern was not bringing wrestlers on his show. I was a huge Stern fan, a huge Stern mark. I watched the show, and I knew if like a guy like Howard Stern would see Sable, he would have her on the show in a heartbeat. That's what Howard did back then. In 97, 98, he just brought hot girls on the show. If you're a fan of Stern, you know that. So I explained to Vince, I think Sable would be able to open doors maybe guys couldn't. She's so beautiful. To put her on a late night show or a Stern, I think it would be a smart move to make. So now the next thing was, Sable knew nothing about wrestling. She came in to be the garnish for Mark Mero. I remember making that call in my office and basically getting Rena and Mark on the phone at the same time. And I laid out my plan for Sable. And I said, listen, I think we can do a lot more with you, if you can learn to work. And they wanted some time to think about it, but they came back and they were all in. And Mark was the one that trained Sable. Listen, I have to say this as a little side note. Sable was so over in 1998, but if you go back and you look at these Attitude Era tapes, on the network, you'll see how instrumental Mark Merrow was in getting her over. What he did for his wife was unbelievable, and a lot of men wouldn't have done that, and nobody talks about that, and nobody points that out. And I don't care what anybody says. I was at the WWE at the time. Sable was getting the second biggest pop behind Stone Cold Steve Austin. Whether you like it or not, that's the truth. All that is being confirmed for me as I go back and I watch this footage. So in 1998, we put the women's title on Sable. Now women's wrestling is back in the WWE. Of course, then China comes into play, but China was a different animal because like everybody knew that China could beat every female on the face of the planet. So nobody was really interested in seeing China fight women. They wanted to see China fight men. That's how believable China is. But basically what I'm saying is, the combination of Sable, the combination of what China was doing at the time, women's wrestling was back in the WWE, after, a 3-year hiatus, after basically between 1990 and 1998, there was only a women's champion for 2 years, from 93 to 95. So, we're just coming off of 6 years, basically, of not even having women's wrestling. So now Sable, now China, now they put it back on the map. Between 2002 and 2006, I like to call this the era of Trish Stratus, who was a 7-time champion. But now we got to look at Trish Stratus. Trish Stratus was an athlete. She was a great worker. She was a great wrestler. She was an athlete prior to coming into wrestling. But Trish Stratus was also beautiful. She was also sexy, and she also had that, that Sable star appeal. So during that time, a lot of people, were tuning in, as Trish was carrying the torch. Now, I want to basically say, as I'm mentioning these names, I don't want to, I'm not belittling anybody who had anything to do with women's wrestling. I know, again, during the Sable era, there was Jacqueline, who, was so underrated and doesn't get the due she deserves. Jacqueline should probably be a WWE Hall of Famer. There was Luna, who definitely should be a WWE Hall of Famer. So there were many other women involved in the mix. I'm just talking about the main one that everything was built around. At about 2008, the WWE goes now to the Divas title, and more emphasis is put on the diva, the look of the wrestler. Some of them weren't great workers, but some of them were beautiful. The guys in that sweet spot from 18 to 34, even go further, 18 to 49, they were tuning in to see these beautiful women, on the show. That was the draw. I'd say probably sometime around 2013, I think there was a shift in women's wrestling, but I also think this coincides with the shift there was in men's wrestling as well. 2013, you had a lot with AJ Lee and Paige. And, it went back and forth for many years. And it was during this time, I feel anyway, that women's wrestling changed. It was no longer, Moolah the heel and Wendy Richter the babyface, Sable the heel and Luna the babyface. Sometime around 2013, especially with AJ and Paige, it became more about the match. These girls came out, don't get me wrong, they're attractive. Both of them are attractive in their own way. but they weren't these glamorous divas that we had been used to, with Sable, through Trish, and a lot of those other women, that had the title, back then. It was more the competition. It was more the match. For the first time, we were seeing the girls have incredible matches. But again, at the same time, the men's emphasis was changing on the match. And I think a lot of this has to do with, the NXT and what they're being trained at NXT, and more guys coming over with less of a character, less of a story, and more of, concentration on in-ring work. So that's where it started to go with AJ and Paige, and you can start to see it. But on the other hand, you still had somebody like the Bellas there, more noticeably, Nikki Bella, who is more of that diva role. And I got to tell you, to this day, I have no problem admitting this. On Monday night, when I'm watching Raw and I'm working, social media at the same time, I have my television set behind me. You might be able to see it right there. And I got to tell you, very rarely do I turn around. I'm listening to what's going on, but there really are very few moments where something is going on exciting enough that I have to see it and I have to turn around. But I'll be honest with you. When the Bella's music hits and I know Nikki's coming out, I turn around to see Nikki Bella. Why? Because I'm a guy. And, I'm not even in the 18 to 49 age range anymore. I'm 54, but I'm still a guy. Nikki Bella is hot. Nikki Bella has a phenomenal body, and I like to see Nikki Bella. Excuse me, kill me, murder me, do whatever you have to do. Even at the age of 54, I still love to see a beautiful woman. And there's no doubt in my mind, going back to 98, the Attitude Era, when every college campus had their dorm, the fraternity, the sports bar, everything was tuned into Monday Night Raw. And one of the main reasons was to see Sable. Nothing has changed. We are guys. We like to see beautiful women. We like to see well-built women. I know me personally, I like to see tough women. I've said this a million times. I'm very attracted to women who I think could kick my ass. I think Nikki Bella could kick my ass. But as I said, she's the exception of the rule now, Nikki Bella, as we move more and more towards the match. We just saw Charlotte come over. We just saw Sasha Banks come over. We just saw Becky Lynch come over. It's more about the match. It's not so much more, the appearance of the female wrestler. And I got to say this now, going back to TNA, which is only a few years ago. I think I left TNA. It's going to be about 3 or 4 years ago. I'm not good with dates. But I can tell you this. The knockouts, every time we would put on a knockout match, the match would outdraw the men. And while these women were great wrestlers and great workers, they were also very sexy. They also presented themselves as divas. The beautiful people, they were divas. And they still drew. Why? Because guys, who the wrestling audience really is supposed to be, wrestling is supposed to be a male soap opera. You've heard that term used before. That's what it's supposed to be. Well, part of that male soap opera is hot, attractive, well-built, sexy women. That's part of the soap opera. So I can tell you firsthand, because I was a ratings nut, the women used to outdraw the men. There was a time at TNA when a very short time, when I actually had the book. It wasn't Jeff Jarrett. It wasn't, Bischoff and Hogan with their ideas. There was a couple of months where I had the book, and there was a stretch there where we were having 2 knockout matches every single show because their rating would outdraw the guys. And again, 18 to 34, 18 to 49. If you're a guy, you want to see attractive, you want to see well-built females, I'm sorry. So now here we are in 2013. Yes, we have some great women wrestlers in the WWE, perhaps the greatest we've ever seen. You know, between Paige and Sasha and Charlotte and Becky, we got a barrage of great women wrestlers. But now again, what it really comes down to is that over? Is that really what the mass audience wants to see? Again, we're seeing a decline in the ratings. So what I'm trying to look at is everything. You know, let's look at every aspect of our business. Are we giving the audience what they want? Now here's the problem. No matter how much we try to cater to a family and we're family friendly, the main demo for any network is still the male 18 to 34 or the male 18 to 49, because they're the ones that spend the money. A little kid doesn't go out and buy merch or buy tickets to the show because he's not getting enough allowance wise. The main customer is going to be that male from 18 to 34, 18 to 49. Is this the type of wrestling that the casual fan, the massive fan, the wrestling fan, you know, wants to see? Or do they want to see the divas? Do they want to see the Sables? Do they want to see, you know, the beautiful people? Do they want to see the attractive knockouts that maybe aren't the greatest wrestlers in the world, but damn, we sure like to see them in that ring, you know, every Monday night? And call that sexist, call it whatever you want, but that's life. Like I said, I instinctively turn around when I hear Nikki Bella's music. That's for a reason. She's a beautiful female. She's got a beautiful body. And as a guy, I want to see that. And I think a lot of guys want to see that. So again, you know, that's why I'm looking at women's wrestling today. And here's really what it all comes down to. And listen, I'm not going to argue with ignorant people who all of a sudden, because the WWE ratings have gone down, they've decided that ratings don't matter anymore. You know, that's their excuse. It's a different time. Ratings don't matter anymore. That's what people use because the WWE ratings have been going down for 15 straight years. Meanwhile, I could tell you, I'm working with iHeartRadio now, and the first conversation I had with them was all about ratings. Every television show you watch, from Dr. Phil to Blind Spot, you can see they're doing everything for ratings. I was watching Fargo the other day. I'm not even kidding you. Within the hour, there were 3 different butt cracks in the show. I saw 3 different asses in Fargo. Ratings. That's what everybody wants. But say the Nimrods that defend the WWE ratings don't matter. Say they're right. Say ratings don't matter. Okay, what does matter with the WWE? Well, what matters to the WWE is the WWE network. Okay, they want to build a subscription base and have their own network. Okay, where are the potential subscribers? Well, the potential subscribers are those that watch Raw. So the less people that watch Raw, the less potential customers they have to buy the WWE network. Do you understand? So even if you've decided and you've convinced yourself that wrestling ratings don't mean anything nowadays, which is absolutely asinine. Listen, if ratings didn't mean anything, how does a network measure the success of any show? How does the network know what to charge for advertising on any given show? The fact that ratings don't matter is preposterous, but let's say they didn't. The WWE network matters. We want new customers. Well, our new customer pool is going to come from Raw. So the less people that watch Raw, the less potential customers we have. Here's the point. This is what it all comes down to. It's not just that the women's wrestling has changed, because it has. When we look at, like I said, I started in '85 at WrestleMania. Moolah the heel, the young up-and-comer, good-looking girl, Wendy Richter at the time. She was cool, she was hip, she was sexy. This is 30 years ago. We go through Medusa, we go through Sable, we go through Trish Stratus. Here we are. Here's the fact. The game has changed. It's not the same product. Wrestling as we knew it throughout the years is not what it is today. A lot of things have changed in wrestling, but the foundation has always been bad guy versus good guy, good versus evil, and they would play that out, through character, through story, and eventually in the ring. That has changed. That doesn't exist anymore. Now it's all on the competition. It's all on high spots. It's all on, death-defying dives over the top rope. It's all on the Tower of Doom, which the girls did the other night. They've changed the game. Okay. Here's the problem with changing the game. The numbers are telling us that perhaps the audience doesn't want this new game. We haven't seen the ratings go up in 15 years. We see them continue to go down. We're putting more and more NXT people where the concentration is on wrestling in these shows. Folks, the viewers are not going up. What that tells me is we know wrestling to be a certain way. We know women's wrestling to be a certain way. Man, I'm in the middle of now the Attitude Era and Sable and Luna, good Beauty and the Beast. Real simple. Well, we're not getting that anymore, and it seems that the casual audience that once bought into wrestling before are not buying into it now. So again, it's not just that the women's wrestling has changed. The game has changed. It's not the same sport. And again, if this were for the better, all the power to them. That they've evolved, they've reinvented the game, and people are into it. But so far, those numbers are not telling us that. So that's a look at women's wrestling. And listen, I was all for all those NXT women coming over, because to me right away what it meant was, more time for the women on the show. And I'm a big fan of women's wrestling. These girls, I think it's safe to say, they probably work harder than the guys because they feel like they're constantly fighting for a spot and television time because they're competing in a man's world. So these girls, every time they're on that show, they go all out. There's no doubt about that. But I think WWE has made the mistake of thinking if we put these girls in a good match, a good match alone is simply going to get them over. I don't think that is the case, because the numbers are not telling us that. I would love to see these girls being developed with a character. I would love some kind of a storyline, and I would love to get back to the basic fundamentals of what wrestling is. Look, you can look at any sport out there. You can look at any form of entertainment out there. A lot of times there's tweaks to the game. There was the designated hitter, in baseball. There was the three-point shot in football, in basketball. A lot of times there are tweaks to the game, but they don't change the very foundation of the game. And wrestling has done that. And it is a different sport today. It's not what wrestling fans have been raised on and what they've been used to and what they've enjoyed for many years. And that's why I say, they're turning into a niche product. That's what wrestling is turning into, in my opinion. Now, don't get me wrong. They're going to sell out their WrestleManias. They're going to get their huge crowds for that. They're even going to get good crowds for Raw. But like, those are events. The WWE has done a tremendous job. I was in San Jose for WrestleMania. of literally turning WrestleMania into the Super Bowl. It is an event. People will go to WrestleMania regardless of who's on the card. It doesn't matter. They've done a great job of doing that. They've done a great job of doing that with Raw. Raw has become an event. But when you look at the house show business, you know, and when you look at, you know, all the other days of the year, you know, WrestleMania comes one time a year. You know, Raw is one day a week. What about all those other house shows? You know, so again, to me, until there's proof that this newfangled form of wrestling, where all the concentration goes on the in-ring work and not the character and not the storylines, until there's proof to me that that's successful, I'm not buying in. I'm not a fan of that. It's that simple. And listen, I read the financial reports, okay? Yes, the WWE is making money. I'm not denying that fact. Let's face it, guys. They're the only game in town. There's no competition for them. If they're not making money, they've got a huge problem on their hands. TNA is not competition. Lucha Underground is not competition. They have no competition. They're the only game in town. So, yes, they're going to make money. However, my point is, if they got those numbers up and got the traditional wrestling fans back, the fans who know the foundation and love the foundation and enjoy the foundation, well, what would their numbers be then? What would their profits be then? How much would they be making then? That's my point. So, you know, like I said, until somebody shows me with numbers, I don't, opinions are like, you know what's. Opinions don't matter. My opinion doesn't matter. Your opinion doesn't matter. Opinions don't matter. The only thing that tells us the real deal are those numbers. And the numbers tell me the last Raw on Monday night was had the lowest viewership since they went to 3 hours. 800,000 people less watched Raw this Monday than they did a year ago. 800,000 people. Something is wrong. You can't blame that on, oh, there's more to watch on TV or DVRs. Walking Dead is drawing 15 million people. The WWE used to beat Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw now, Monday Night Football now is quadrupling the ratings of Raw, when Raw used to beat Monday Night Football. So something's wrong. And that's what I'm looking at. And I'm trying to look at every aspect of it. But I love women's wrestling. I want to see more women wrestling on the show. I've said this all the time. Nothing I say is a slight at the women. They don't write the show. They go out there every week, balls to the wall, the best performance they could give us. It's not on them. It's on the people that are driving the ship. So that's it. That's my nuclear heat for this week. Join us on Monday night when we review Raw on WrestlingInc.com. And again, you can follow me 7 days a week on VinceRussoBrand.com. We do video podcasting every single day. So check us out. If you like it, climb on board. But that's it for today, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show. Have a great weekend. I'll catch you all on the rebound.